tremendously changeful times. But astrologically, the Uranus-Pluto square, it really corroborates that that what our senses are telling us, what our intuition is telling us, that these times are incredibly changeful times, is really the case. So let's now shift our focus to what's going on this month. We looked at the kind of macrocosmic view, the big picture, the big picture that's really the entire, 2012 through 2015 phase. We'll be back here again and again and again as we talk about what unfolds or what will unfold before us. But now let's shift gears and come back to what's happening this month, what's happening in our personal lives right ahead of us, right, on our plates today. Yeah. So, by the way, we're doing, not only is Jeff not here today, but we're using different equipment to record it. And so you need to bear with us, because what we're doing is we're going to record in 4 15-minute segments. So we just ended the first segment. We'll go right into the second, but the camera needs to reset, just so that you know what's going on here. Why? Okay. Real helpful. All right. So this month, September of 2012, we're finishing up with the Virgo energy. The sun is in Virgo for much of this month. The autumn equinox, the first day of autumn in the northern hemisphere, the first day of spring in the southern hemisphere, is on September 22nd, September 22nd. And although the first day of autumn in the northern hemisphere is an important astrological transition every year, this year it's more important, and we'll get to that in a moment as to why. But I want to come back to the Virgo energy that we're still in right now, because Virgo is about focusing. This is the time of year when nature begins to focus the energy that was outgoing from the first moment of spring, when the seeds began to grow, and all through the summer sun, when in Leo the flowers are out and everything is in full bloom. And then as the sun moves into Virgo, the days aren't getting, it's not like the days are equal yet. We're not in autumn, but the energy's beginning to pull back. The days begin to get shorter here in the northern hemisphere. And what happens is that nature observes this cycle and begins to pull the energy in and put it into compact forms. This is why when we harvest seeds, when we harvest the wheat, which is one of or corn, which is, the energy is put back into little packets of energy, which is really part of what Virgo is all about. Virgo focuses, it intensifies, it pulls in energy, and it becomes like a laser beam. So the sun and Mercury are both in Virgo now. Mercury is Virgo's key planet. And with Virgo and Mercury, our intellects are really focused these days. But it's not just about getting information. It's about getting information that's useful. You see, because Virgo is an earth sign. Earth in astrology has to do with being practical. Feet on the ground, down to earth. And even though Mercury is mental, Mercury is information, it's intellect, with Mercury in Virgo, and the connection between Mercury and Virgo naturally is that information, when it's applied, becomes useful. Mercury also connects with Gemini. Gemini is information that doesn't have to be useful. Gemini is just interactive information. It's the tap dancing that our mind does, the monkey mind, as the Buddhists call it. It's the interactive energy that has to do with exchange, mercantile, exchange. It's that information exchange. But in Virgo, there's an intense focus. So we have Mercury that is now in Virgo until September 16th. And on September 16th, Mercury moves from Virgo into Libra ahead of the Sun, and then is followed by the Sun on September 22nd on the first day of autumn. So we have here, with Mercury and the Sun in Virgo, there's this sense of this need to focus and to narrow our thinking. But the problem is that we can become so finely tuned that we don't see the big picture. And I think this is part of the order of business this week, is to keep reminding ourselves that the details of what we're dealing with in our lives, the kind of practical, I want to call them mechanical, but I don't mean like automotive things. I mean the real issues that we're dealing with as we keep our lives going. It's important that we do that, but it's also important that we keep our vision open to the larger changes that are going on. Tomorrow, on September 5th, 6th, thank you. Today on September 5th, tomorrow on September 6th, we have a planet-changing signs, and that is, you can see over here, Venus right now is at the end of Cancer, and on the 6th, Venus moves from Cancer into Leo. For the last several weeks with Venus in Cancer, there's been a sense of Venus is what we like. Venus is what we're attracted to. In Cancer, Venus is attracted to security, safety, nurturing, taking care of. Venus can pull back. There's a sense of indrawing of energy, of withdrawing, of retreating. But tomorrow, when Venus moves into Leo, in some ways, the show begins. Because instead of liking the quiet, unspoken, safe, nurturing energy, we like the show. Leo is the presentation. Leo is dramatic. And so we might get a little boost of energy as Venus moves into Leo tomorrow. And then over the following day or two, the other thing that even boosts the energy even more is that Jupiter is 90 degrees to the Sun on September 8th, followed by a square. Actually, Mercury is 90 degrees to Jupiter on the 8th, and it's followed by the Sun, actually on the 7th and on the 8th. So today is the 5th. That's Wednesday. I'm showing off now. On the 7th, on Friday, and on Saturday, the 8th, both Mercury and the Sun will square Jupiter. And what this does, Jupiter is the planet of bigger, better, and more. Jupiter is the magnifying lens of the zodiac. As the Sun, in narrowing Virgo, and Mercury, in narrowing Virgo, squares Jupiter in expansive Gemini, there's a sense of kind of listening to two radio stations at the same time. I know I've said this here before at Soul Foods, talking about the difference between Virgo and Gemini, but Virgo is like an FM radio. Gemini is like an AM radio. AM radio is talk radio. It's noisy, it's sloppy, you tune, you get interference, you yell back at it, you change the station. With FM radio, you get a huge amount of data over a very narrow bandwidth. It's exact. You have the station that you like, you camp out there, you stay there. So, what's happening throughout this week is not only that does Venus move into Leo, which is an outgoing energy, but on top of that, we begin to get skitzed out by by the part of us that wants to focus and listen to our narrowly tuned station on FM radio, and then the part of our reality that's tuning reality back and forth all over the map, and we can't stay focused. So, the good news here is that we have an extraordinary amount of information at our disposal. The bad news is that it's sometimes difficult to know which information is valuable, which information to use. Are you with me? What happens over the following week is that I'm going to just advance this a day at a time. By the way, as the moon through the 10th moves through Cancer, as any planet moves through a cardinal or season-changing sign, and that would be Aries starting spring, Cancer starting summer, Libra starting autumn, and Capricorn starting winter. As any planet moves through a cardinal or season-changing sign these days, it's going to form a hard aspect, that's a conjunction, square, or opposition, with both Uranus in cardinal Aries and Pluto in cardinal Capricorn. So when the moon moves into Cancer on September 12th, it's going to, through the 11th, 12th, and 13th, it's going to oppose Pluto and square Uranus. And remember, Uranus and Pluto right now are really closely square, which they will do 7 times between the summer of 2012 and the spring of 2015. But when they're close, every time the moon, every 7 days, the moon moves into a cardinal sign, it's going to re-rattle that energy and re-stimulate all this stuff. So mid-September, we're going to get a hit as the moon opposes Pluto and then squares Uranus. And as we move along, what happens is that, we're going to push this along a day at a time, is that as we approach the new moon, and the new moon is on, is on September 15th in the evening, and let's get this exact here for us. Normally when Jeff's here, he gets to talk while I get to do this. So there we go. That's close enough. So here we have the new moon in Virgo on September 15th. The moon and the sun are aligned at the same place in the sky. And Mercury at the very end of Virgo is still in the picture. So I think this new moon on September 15th is very much a turning point. It's a turning point like all new moons are, but it's a turning point because with Virgo, we've been able to remain in the analytical mental framework. And after the new moon, what happens is that, let me go back to a day at a time here. After the moon and Mercury both shift into Libra. And I said earlier that when Mercury shifts into Libra, and then on the autumnal equinox when the sun shifts into Libra, I said that the sun does this every year, but this year is going to be different. Remember I said that earlier? Well, the reason is that when Mercury and the moon shift from Virgo into Libra after the Virgo new moon on the 15th, they will both oppose Uranus and square Pluto within just a couple of days of the Uranus-Pluto square being exact. For those of you who are mathematically inclined, we have Pluto here at 6 degrees 57 minutes and Uranus at 7 degrees of 2 minutes. This is 5 minutes of arc. That's 1/12 of a degree from being exactly 90 degrees. And into that, we get the moon opposition as it moves into Libra, and then Mercury opposing it, opposing Uranus and squaring it over the next couple of days, the 18th through the 20th, followed by the sun at the end of the month. So do you see why this is so important? Because what happens is that these outer planets set up global, political, social, economic issues. We're seeing some of this already playing out in the presidential election, which is another whole story. Astrologically, I don't know if you know this, but on election day, Mercury turns retrograde. On election day. It's done this one time in recent history. That was on the Gore-Bush election. When Mercury was retrograde on that day and it threw the election into turmoil, well, there are astrologers who are suggesting that we might see something even messier this year. All right. We just took another break, by the way. That's what that was about, just so that you're with me here. This is really different. Are we recording again? This is really different doing this without Jeff. That's all I got to say. I'm very comfortable. It's not a problem for me. It's just very different having to keep the energy going because...
It's different here, too. It's a slower pace, but we get to digest it easier, too. There's not so much banter to it.
So thank you for, being open to this little bit of a different format. Of course, those of you who are here next month, you get Jeff's reply, or what do you call that? His rebuttal. Yeah. So, we ready? I want to go back to the new moon for just a moment, because on the day of the new moon, there's another thing that I think is very significant this month, and that is a quincunx between Jupiter and Mars. Quincunx is like one of these words that it doesn't work. It's Latin for 5/12. And a quincunx is 150 degrees or 5/12 of a circle. And it turns out that this fat green line between Mars at 15 degrees of Scorpio and Jupiter at 15 degrees of Gemini, this is the quincunx of the month. It's like the quincunx of the month club. Quincunxes are irritating. It's like oil and water. You know, when two planets are harmonized or trine, it's like the energy flows through them really, really easily. When two planets are square, like Uranus and Pluto, when two planets are square, there's dynamic interaction, but they're engaged. When two planets are quincunx, it's like they can't even see each other. You know, well, everyone do this little exercise with me. Take your right hand and wiggle your fingers up, off, like at about eye level. And then move it back to that point where you can see that there's motion, but you can't see that it's fingers. You got it? All right. Now make believe that there's a steel beam connecting your wrist and your ear, and turn to look at it. You see, what happens is that when your head turns, your hand turns too, so you can't make it go away, but you can't bring it into focus. Are you with me? It's like the mosquito in your tent that you can't catch. Every time you start to doze off, you hear that, and you turn on your flashlight, your lantern, whatever, and you go, "Come on, mother, I'm going to find you." And 10 minutes later, there's nothing, and you go, "Well, I guess it got out or whatever," and you power everything down, and you get back into your sleeping bag, and just as you're ready to doze off, you hear that. That's what a quincunx is. You can't resolve it, and you can't make it go away. All right, so we have Mars, the planet of action. Mars is the warrior planet. Mars is the just do it planet. Mars says go, go, go. And it's in a quincunx with Jupiter. What does Jupiter say? More. Yeah. Great. What happens when Mars and Jupiter are in this kind of dynamic, irritating aspect? Well, we don't know what our limits are. Enough may be way too much. So what happens when Mars and Jupiter form a quincunx, it's really hard to know how much energy, that's Mars, to apply, that's Mars, to a situation, because Jupiter is encouraging it, whether it makes sense or not. So during this new moon in Virgo, we need to pay attention to the fact that we may be able to justify and rationalize and intellectualize, that's all Virgo stuff, and we can talk ourselves into taking action, but it may be wise to moderate our enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is a good is a good Mars-Jupiter word, and in fact, the word enthusiasm comes from with God, and theos, enthusiasm, because there's no intervention. It's just like the energy's flowing through you. And that's cool if you have divine inspiration, but with a Mars-Uranus quincunx, you may be working on ego energy. Okay. So let's push on. We have here, we already talked about how on the 16th, Mercury moves into Libra. The moon is now in its opposition to, let me take the aspects of the moon off here so that it's not so noisy. Hold on one second. No moon. There we go. All right. So we now have the moon that is opposing Uranus and squaring Pluto, the moon in Libra on the 16th, and Mercury moves into Libra, and over the next few days, can you see how that red square begins to build? Do you see that right there? All right. This is Mercury. This is Mercury moving into Libra, and then through the 18th to the 20th, Mercury opposes Uranus and squares Pluto, and this is actually exact on the 20th, but the Uranus-Pluto square is exact on the 18th. So I would imagine that that between now and the middle of September, these global social, political, economic, the presidential stuff, all these issues are going to heat up more and more and more and more. And around the 18th to the 20th, they will peak on some level. But as Mercury comes into the picture on the 18th, 19th, exact on the 20th, and even on the 21st, the amount of interaction and communication, the media stuff, is going to be really cooking. It's really incumbent in our personal lives that we show up with Mercury, communication, engaging Uranus, the unpredictable, the uncertain, the unknown, Pluto. You know, Pluto is the lord of the hell realms. And the hell realms here, they're not the place where you go to get punished. This is the mythological hell realms where wealth is. It's plutocracy is a government that's ruled by the wealthy. Pluto was immeasurable wealth. It's the wealth of all the symbolic treasures in our unconscious minds. And so, in a way, when you think of Uranus and Pluto lining up in the 60s, Uranus is like an explosion that can't be contained. It's like lightning firing up the sky. Pluto is like the depth of the unconscious. This was the Bacchanalian expression through sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the 60s, the Uranus-Pluto energy. And now, as Uranus and Pluto square and Mercury comes clicking into that through the middle of September, I think we can expect things in the news that may get our attention again, that may not be things that are going on now that we think. In other words, what we think on a linear trajectory between now and mid-September, we may be surprised with some events that happen here as Uranus, Mercury's opposition to Uranus, brings things out into the open that we just don't expect. Then, on the 22nd, the sun, Mercury is now already moving past the exact degree points of the Uranus-Pluto. But then, on the 22nd, the sun moves into Libra, and the sun then begins to pick up on the Uranus-Pluto square. Even though the Uranus-Pluto square was on the 18th, it's done, so to speak. I mean, it's really still 10 minutes, 6 degrees 58 minutes, 6 degrees 48 minutes. That's 1/6 of a degree, 10 minutes of arc from being exactly square. And into that, the sun moves opposite Uranus, and watch this get bigger and fatter day by day, so that by the time we reach September 29th, the sun is opposing Uranus and squaring Pluto, and this is also right around the time of the full moon. The full moon is on the 29th, and so we're going to have one hell of an ending to this month with a full moon in Aries, and that full moon in Aries will be conjunct Uranus, the planet of lightning, sudden change, rock and roll. Uranus releases tension, even when you don't know that tension was there. So as the full moon moves into phase, and the full moon is lining up with Uranus, the full moon is squaring Pluto, the sun is opposing Uranus, and the sun is squaring Pluto. This, you see, I started this thought a couple of times earlier, and I don't think I finished it, and I'm going to circle around now to make this point. That the Uranus-Pluto square is transpersonal. Planets outside the realm of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are not about the personal, physical, sensible, sensual of the senses. They're symbolic, they're metaphysical, they're imaginal, they shock the system with ideas, with thoughts, with emotions, etc. But when you have an outer planet configuration or aspect like this Uranus-Pluto square, when personal planets, personal meaning the sun, the who I am, the moon, the how I feel, Mercury, how I think, Venus, what I like, Mars, what I do. When you have these personal planets coming into the alignment with this greater outer alignment, what it does is it like channels the energy down to a personal level. So what we have this time, unlike the Uranus-Pluto square back in June, we have this Uranus-Pluto square holding its pattern much, much longer because both Uranus and Pluto are retrograde here. And into that is coming first Mercury on the 18th to the 20th actually, and then the sun and the moon on the 29th. So it's like these large-scale events take on personal meaning in our lives individually, and because it's a full moon, an opposition in astrology is often felt in a relationship dynamic. And when I say a relationship here, I don't necessarily mean a marriage, although it can be that, or a parent-child, it can be that, or an employer-employee, although it can be that. I mean the relationship between self and everything else. You see, because what happens in an opposition, which a full moon is an opposition, what happens in an opposition is that it's like a tug-of-war. And the energies get stretched in opposite directions. Here they're stretched from the Aries side, Aries, I, me, mine, self. Aries is about doing it and asking questions later. I sometimes say Aries is the ready, fire, aim sign. And I can say that because I got what's the technical word? Shit pile. I have a shit pile of planets in Aries. It's a technical use of that word. Okay, so we have the moon and Uranus pulling into this, just do it. Aries, go. But the sun is in relationship-oriented Libra, because Libra is as far away from Aries as you can get. It's self and everything else. Libra is the sign of the dynamic of relationships. Libra is the harmony that is created when self and other creates common ground. Now, Libra is one of those signs that's often not understood, because often Libra is considered to be indecisive or wimpy, go along with whatever, you know. However, I always think of President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, during the war, who was a Libra. And he had a very placid face. He seemed like a really congenial guy. He probably liked to play golf more than anything else. And yet this is a guy who was able to strategize the winning of World War II. Libra is like a chess match. We're talking about the art of war. We're talking about that ability to do martial arts in a way that kind of works with what the opponent's situation is. Libra is not a wimpy sign. It's a sign of diplomacy. And here, when we have the sun moving into Libra and opposing Uranus and squaring Pluto, I think we're going to see some very, very powerful shifts on the larger diplomatic world scene and on the individual relationship scene. What's that? Oh, didn't even notice. Thank you. Thank you much. Okay. What was that? Okay. Last little bit. Are we ready? So, looking ahead at this month, the dynamics of the month are very strong because it's almost like back last spring, not this year, but a year ago, Arab Spring, you know, Fukushima meltdown, March of 2011, which was when Uranus, actually the Fukushima earthquake happened on the day that Uranus moved into Aries. Can't make it up this good. I mean, I don't mean that there's anything good about that. But when Uranus moved into Aries in March of 2011 and first began to pick up on the square to Pluto, that's the energy that was released, followed by then the Arab Spring and the Occupy everything. So what I'm suggesting is that as we move further along into this autumn of presidential politics, that the presidential politics in some ways are just a reflection of our individual lives. Look, things out there aren't working. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle politically you're on, things aren't working. And it doesn't matter probably who we elect into office, things are still not working. However, there is something that is working, and that's this energy here. Just like in the 60s, where there was political unrest that came out, the election is not the end game this fall. The election is not the end game. It's just another piece in a very complex series of unfolding energies. And in fact, it's how we show up individually that's going to be important in all of this. It's how we show up individually in our lives. It's how we are each willing to confront the uncertainty of Uranus as it stirs things up and brings things out into the open, even though we've never been here before. It's the unknown of the depths and the intensity of these plutonic transformations when we go into the mysteries, when we go into the dark, when we go into the dream time, and we're not in control anymore. However, and I think I've probably said this here before also, when you have Pluto involved, it's a lot like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. You know, when we watch a young child watching the amazing transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly, we go into this Isn't nature wonderful? Isn't this amazing how this furry, ugly, creepy, crawly thing becomes this magnificent, wonderful thing? Isn't nature beautiful? And the child watching this for the first time is just in awe. Did you ever think about it from the caterpillar's point of view? It's not a pretty picture. First, this fluid comes out of your body that you've never seen before, and you compulsively wrap yourself and cover yourself in it, and then it hardens on you. And then you can't move, and it's dark. And then your skin begins to disintegrate. And then your eyeballs melt. It's like an acid trip. Well, it actually is, but that's another story. The caterpillar's world ends. I mean, the caterpillar dissolves. If you open up a cocoon, halfway through the process, it's just this brown, black, goppy goo. And there's no caterpillar and no butterfly. And that's it. Done. End of story. But nature doesn't end when we think it ends. I remember this cartoon that I've seen of these two caterpillars at the base of a milkweed plant, and a butterfly's going by, and one caterpillar says to the other, "Man, you'd never get me up in one of those contraptions." We are all caterpillars. The caterpillar cannot envision the butterfly. But the caterpillar, when it trusts in the natural process, evolves, transforms, metamorphoses. Is that a right word? Metamorphosizes. Metamorphosizes into a higher form of intelligence, into the butterfly. We have egos. Our egos are like our caterpillars. If the caterpillar had an ego, it would never get into the damn cocoon because it's the end. It's the hell realms. It's all done. And by the same token, when we reach places in our lives where we can't see around the corner, and none of us right now can see around this next corner. We can't. We are all in the same boat. Maybe some of us have more heavier, more intense personal experiences. There are those people who have lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their families, lost their lives. So, to some extent, that we here in this room maybe have not done all of that. We're privileged. And yet we still cannot see what's around the corner. And our egos are screaming, "Hell no, I won't go." Because the ego fears its death. Trungpa Chogyam Rinpoche, the founder of Naropa Institute, the Buddhist school in Boulder, once wrote, and I love this quote, he once wrote, "Enlightenment is the ego's greatest disappointment." Enlightenment is the ego's greatest disappointment. Why? Because the ego doesn't get to go along for the ride. So here we are at the edge of this abyss. Granted, it's a 3-5 year long abyss that really began a year or so ago. But we're at a critical point throughout this next month, throughout these next few years. And we need to pay attention to ourselves, because all this global cosmic stuff all comes back to ourselves. That's the way in which we filter. That's the way in which we interpret these larger issues. And when we find ourselves saying, "I ain't going, I can't go, I've given up everything, there's nothing more for me to lose, I'm done, I'm cashing in my chips," you need to remember, like the caterpillar, that it's the ego's fear of its own demise, not our own lives, but our own demise. It's the ego's fear of the unknown that pulls in and creates boundaries And the more the ego pulls in and creates fear and boundaries, the more difficult the path becomes. Now, I'm not saying that we all should just roll over and play dead or float downstream or let the bad guys take over our country I'm not suggesting that there's no reason to become involved. But as we become involved, it's also important to understand that this process of plutonic transformation that we're on the edge of is a natural process that's been going on for billions of years. And it's perfectly safe. It's perfectly safe. And the more we resist it, the more difficult it will become. So as we face our own individual abysses or changes or unknowns or fears or places in our lives where we're uncertain, this is where the work is. This is where the juice is. And because both Mercury and the Sun during this period of time are both involved, it's important that we keep showing up and we keep interacting the best that we can, because it is the dialogue, it is the interaction, it is that ongoing balance between self and other that creates the realities of the future. One last thing I want to touch on here. We kind of really focused on the Uranus-Pluto to a great extent tonight, and it is really the main game. But there's something else that comes up towards the end of September that's exact on September 27th. And no, it's actually, that is Venus square Mars. Venus in Leo makes a 90-degree square to Mars in Scorpio. And this square between the cosmic lovers, Venus, love, attraction, desire, Mars, physical energy. Venus is what you want, Mars is how you're going to get it. Venus and Mars are the cosmic lovers, and when they are square, they're sparks. Now, squares, remember, are tension, stress, dynamic interaction. If we pull back, if we repress or suppress, and the difference between repression and suppression is that when we suppress something, we know we're doing it, and when we repress it, we're unconscious, we don't know we're doing it. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, if we bury the stress or the tension, it's going to express somehow anyhow as a projection. So the key here is, as this month wears on and Venus and Mars, which travel kind of together, you can see that over the week before, this Venus-Mars square kind of stays in focus. I mean, it gets bigger, thicker, and thicker all the way through the 27th. But the fact is that Venus and Mars being 90 degrees to each other is going to put some stress or tension into our lives about what we want versus how we're going to get it, versus what we have versus what we need. And Venus is also money. Mars, is the work that we have to do to get the money even. So this is a bit of stress. However, Venus and Mars can also play well together when they are in stress, because it's the playful side of love. This can be very sexually intense. It can be very much competitive, or it can be even combative. But again, if we let our egos step out of the way and we understand that there's an interplay here, that we actually can work with the energy and use it in a creative manner rather than have it somehow come back at us in a way that is less than creative. This is a tremendously creative aspect, but we have to be willing to understand that creativity isn't always just smoothly expressing what we're feeling, that there can be angst, there can be intensity wrapped around those feelings. Whew. So, in closing, let's just say that September is one of those months. But it's not the only month. It is very much a time of dynamic and profound change. And we can choose either to engage it directly and work with it, or try to sidestep the major issues, walk around them, spend our time walking on eggshells, which is a lot easier than breaking them in the given moment. However, in this case, because this Uranus-Pluto square is not going to go away, the more we can deal with each time it repeats, the better we will be the next time it repeats. So throughout 2013, and then 2014, 2 more times, and then early in 2015, each of these times that this Uranus-Pluto square repeats, and each of the times that the Sun and Mercury and Venus and even Mars come through and square and oppose or conjunct this Uranus-Pluto square, as it will do again later on this fall and in the winter around Christmas time, we'll run through another eye of the needle. The more we can do now, the better off we will be the next time round. Thank you. Now, a couple of things before we take a break. We'll take a 10 or 15 minute break. We'll come back. We'll look at 3 charts. If you want your chart to be considered, put your name, your first name, your birth date, place, and time of day on a piece of paper. Clipping a $100 bill to it helps you get chosen. No kidding. Put it on, fold it up, put it on the table here. 2 other things I have to say. One is that Jeff Jower and I co-author an annual book for Sterling Press. Your Astrology Guide 2013 has just come out. They are available here. By patronizing the store, you help keep it going. Jeff and I, well, not Jeff tonight, Jeff and I volunteer our time here. It's a community thing. We're happy to do that, but we ask that you patronize the store, buy your gifts here, buy books. Certainly patronizing Jeff and I by buying this book is helpful. Your Astrology Guide 2013 on sale here now. It is $12.95. I will sign my name and Jeff's name in absentia if you buy one tonight. They are up at the checkout counter. Get them while they last. They'll be out. Also, I want to just mention that Julie, our wonderful videographer, thank you, Julie, and thanks to the barista crew back there. That Julie makes these wonderful astrological pendants with your chart on them. She's wearing one if you want to look at them. They're available here too. They're at the checkout counter. Peggy over there is showing one of them over there. And again, patronizing soul food helps us all. See you all in about 10 or 15 minutes. Thanks. That's hard work without Jeff. We'll start here in just a couple of minutes.
My bad. That's on me. So sorry. A little too down.
Okay, we ready to start again? Okay. Oh, let me get these going up here. So the drill is that if I pick your chart, I've already picked 3. I say your name, stand up on the table, do a dance, wave your arms around, so we know who you are, so that if we're making fun of you, that we know who we're making fun of. As we've said here before, when we do this part of the evening, this is a taste of what real personal astrology is like. But of course, getting a full individual reading is much more in-depth and much more interactive, much more detailed. But it gives you a flavor of what that's like. But more importantly, if we choose your chart, it's not for you. It's for us. We're using these as learning tools so that we can all get something out of it. And of course, if you see an astrologer with a real session, it is in fact for you. But when we do it in this manner here, we use the chart more as a teaching tool than anything else. And if you get something out of it too, well, wonderful. So, how come we don't have this yet? Hold on. All right, not exactly sure why. We'll get there. Aha! It's the old plug falls out. Oh, yeah. Sometimes the solutions are the simplest. All right, let's try this now. Okay. We're good. Okay, Denise, are you here? Okay. So Denise, have you ever had your chart done before? Do you know anything about your chart? Well, I don't really know a lot of what I'm doing. I just kind of fake it. Okay, so we have Denise, born September 12th, 1973. Oh, happy birthday. We don't sing happy birthday unless you pay for it, though. We see here that the sun, along with Mercury, is in Virgo. And the moon, oh, let's get the moon aspects kicked back in here. I had these disconnected before. Aspects at planets, that works, and aspected points, and that works. Okay. So, do you know that you were born on the day of the full moon? That you were born on a full moon? You were actually born 8 hours after the full moon, and here's how I can tell this. The sun is in Virgo, the moon is in Pisces. Pisces is opposite Virgo. So if the moon is in the sign opposite the sun, that's within a day or two of the full moon. However, the sun is at 20 degrees of Virgo. The moon is at 24 degrees of Pisces. The moon moves about a degree every 2 hours. So it's 4 degrees away from being exact, which is about 8 hours. So you were born about 8 or 9 hours after the full moon. However, you were born during the day, 5 p.m., the sun is up in the sky, you couldn't see the moon, it was down below. So with the sun in Virgo and the moon in Pisces, the sun is who you are. You are an analytical, detailed, oriented Virgo that wants information and wants to know what's right and what's not right. However, the moon in Pisces is the space cadet. It's the dreamer. Do we have other moon in Pisces people here? Come on, be honest. Yeah, drugs. No, I didn't say that. You see, Pisces is about imagination. Pisces is the dreamer. It's about compassion. What does compassion have to do with imagination? Pisces is Latin for fish. The fish swim in the ocean. There's only one ocean. It's the sea or the ocean of consciousness. We are all fish with the same seas flowing through us. Spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so the moon in Pisces is in some ways, it's Pisces energy is the energy that dissolves the boundaries that create the illusion of me and you. And so if I don't have the illusion that I'm separate from you and you're hurting, I feel that. So Pisces moon people, in some ways, are psychic sponges. When they have feelings or dreams, it's hard sometimes to know what's theirs and what's coming off the airwaves. Now that's so different than the precision analytical Virgo sun. And this is the dance that you do as you move through life, is trying to balance the two of those. Your chart has a bit of power. You were born with Saturn and Pluto. These are Saturn is the end of the road. Saturn is Satan, but without the negative Christian judgment that in the end we all get hell. Saturn is limits. Saturn is the hard work we have to do. Saturn in your chart is square to Pluto. This is about control and management of resources, and it's not an easy aspect. However, the good news is that you have Pluto, harmonized with Jupiter. Jupiter, the planet of bigger and better and more. And so you can take the difficult situations, and even though they can be annoying and difficult for you, you work at transforming them and bringing the energy up. This is part of, I think, what you do in life in general. Does that make sense to you at all? Yeah. I also think that with Saturn and Pluto in early cardinal signs, the season-changing signs, Saturn in Cancer, summer, Pluto in early Libra, autumn, that the Uranus-Pluto square that we talked about earlier is already past these degrees, which leads me to think that none of us are done, but to some extent, you've already been through some of the hard stuff that other people are just coming into. So that whatever changes or difficulties you faced in your life, and maybe even over the last several years, that in some ways you're kind of through that eye of the needle, and it's not that it's smooth sailing and everything's cool and whatever, but it's like you wouldn't want to have to go through what you went through, 2, 3, 4 years ago, again and again, and you don't have to. Does that make sense to you? Praise the Lord. Yeah, I mean, I think that your world shifted, over the past several years. I mean, not even just the past 2 or 3 years, but even going back, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Your world shifted as Uranus moved through Pisces over your moon probably 5 or 6 years ago, and just blasted change, upheaval that you weren't expecting. Total shift of direction or changes. But then over the last couple of years, about 3 years ago, Saturn moved through there also. And I really think that again, now as everyone else is kind of on the front end of these edges of change, it's not like you're home free, but you don't have to go through what you've been through already. Make sense? Emma? No, it's not okay. I'm a little bit of a name Nazi, and not only do names need to be spelled correctly, but if you ask someone what's your name and they say Anna, you go, oh, nice to meet you, Anna. No, you say the name the way the person says their name. Is this so hard? And if you can't say, you say, would you say that again? And you go, Anna? Well, no, it's more like, just my thing. Okay. Emma with 2 M's. So, Emma is a weirdo Aquarius with a feisty Aries moon, but Emma is packaged behind a conservative-looking Capricorn. In other words, what I want to say is that with Mercury, the planet of communication, on your Capricorn ascendant, that you get to go through life looking like you're more in control and more conservative, perhaps, than you really are. Yes, no? You're looking at me like no. Some truth to that. It's interesting because in some ways I think you're pretty futuristically oriented. The Aries moon is about spontaneity. It's about being in the moment. It's the power of now. Is an Aries moon. It's the feeling that I like to call it my theory of the overinflated importance of the present moment. It's like what's happening now trumps everything else. The Aquarius sun, Aquarius is the sign of the future. Aquarius is an air sign. It's intellectual. Arguably, Aquarius is the most intelligent sign in the zodiac. And with the Aries sun harmonized with the moon, and with the Aquarius sun harmonized with the Aries moon. And in astrology, every planet relates to a sign, and every sign relates to a planet. Emma is an Aquarius. In modern astrology, the planet that connects with Aquarius is Uranus. We talked about Uranus earlier. It's the lightning striking planet. It's the light bulb going on. Thomas Edison, an Aquarius, was a very Uranian being. Remember the movie Back to the Future? The professor? Pure Uranus. You know, it's so futuristic, it's like you don't know whether he's a genius or crazy or both. So, in your chart, the sun is in Aquarius, which means that Uranus is like a key planet for you, because Uranus is the key planet for Aquarius. And you were born with the sun harmonized or trine to Uranus, which ups the ante of your intelligence and the speed at which your mind works. What's interesting, though, is that the Capricorn Mercury slows it down. And so there's a part of you that is like ahead of the game always, maybe in what you do and how you're doing it, but you have to go back to the basics. The Capricorn Mercury needs to have fundamental foundations that are building blocks. And so this becomes, I think, part of the dance that you do. And I think that in some ways, with Uranus, the planet of sudden change, and that, kind of unexpected, erratic, futuristic, unorthodox energy, with Uranus opposite the moon, that it may be also that in relationships, you either attract or become the one who's commitment phobic, or that attracts someone who is weird enough, that's the Uranus side, who's eclectic enough, individualistic enough, that you can like them a lot knowing that they're going to always disconnect or leave the note on the refrigerator just in time. Now, I don't know whether that's a caricature or overstated, but often what happens because Aquarius, there's a bit of emotional detachment in Aquarius. It's very practical with the Uranus rising. You have 4 planets in Sagittarius. I get the good idea. Sorry, what'd someone say? Sag power. Okay. Sag is the visionary. Sag is the adventurer. Sagittarius is the distant star that becomes what I'm heading for. And again, so a lot of your chart is about action-oriented, it's about intelligence-oriented, and it's not that you don't have feelings, it's just that there's an ability to detach oneself from the messiness or the desire to not get into messy situations, whatever that means. Jeff always says that Aquarians are the people that love humanity but hate the humans in it. I always think of Groucho Marx, who once said, I would never be stupid enough to join a club. I would never join a club that would be stupid enough to ask me to be a member. And there's a bit of Aquarius. You want to be the outsider, but you want to be a part of at the same time. Now, I think the key piece of your chart these days as to what's going on is that you're coming up to Uranus, which, if you remember from our picture earlier on, is at about 7 degrees of Aries. Over the next year and a half, Uranus will be coming across your moon in Aries. Pluto, over the next year and a half or two, will be coming to square your moon, and then eventually over the next couple of years will be coming up over your ascendant. What this means is that what's ahead of you 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road probably has very little to do with what's behind you. That there's some very exciting and sudden changes that may not be so surprising because you are an Aries moon, you're ready to go. An Aries moon lives its life on the launching pad, ready and waiting for someone to say ignition. It's like that excitement, the adrenaline rush of the moment. And I think that as Uranus comes up over your moon, you may already feel. Does anyone know Tom Robbins' book, Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas? Do you know that book? You know Tom Robbins, who wrote, um, Still Life with Woodpecker and Cowgirls Get the Blues. Well, he wrote a book called Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas. And it's kind of, the idea is that we're all waiting for the aliens to come and take us away. And we're like, because the aliens are amphibians, and so therefore they must be frogs. And so we're all like frogs on the lily pad waiting to jump. So we're all half asleep in frog pajamas. Your chart has that sense of you're on the pad. You're on the lily pad waiting to jump. You know, Uranus is close enough to your moon that you know that something's out there. And you know that things are ready to shift, that things might seem uncertain or unstable, and you know that it's going to happen, but you don't know what it is or how it's going to happen. And I would just suggest that as it does, the more you can engage it and the more ready you are to jump into the future, which in your chart you are, don't overanalyze, don't overthink it, just be ready to go. Yeah. Make sense? Yeah? Definitely. All right, and Sue. So I noticed, is there a connection between an Emma and a Sue? Because your last names are the same. Emma Dixon, Sue Dixon. Where's Sue? Do you guys know? You don't know each other?
No.
You're both Dixons.
Maybe we do.
I almost unchose the second one because I thought maybe you were here together. Not that really would have mattered. Okay, wow. Do you see how different each chart is? I mean, as you look at charts, the patterns that the planets make are just extraordinarily different from one another. So we have Sue born in 1951 when Saturn was moving through Libra, which it is now. It's at the tail end. It's moving into Scorpio in October. So, yay. Saturn lined up with the sun and the moon. This is a new moon chart. In fact, because there's 7 degrees, 7 and 7 are 14, there's 7 degrees between the sun and the moon. The moon moves a degree every 4 hours. Sue was born how many hours after the full moon? 7 degrees, 1 degree every 2 hours, 14 hours after the new moon. Are you with me? So you're a new moon baby. New moons are the beginnings of the cycle. New moons start things. Now, Libra isn't normally a starting planet or starting sign. Libra normally is about harmonizing and balance. It's about the diplomacy, about meeting others halfway. With Saturn lined up with the sun and with the moon. Hold on a second. I've been fighting a cough and I've held it off until now. And so bear with me here if I need to stop for a moment again. So Saturn, the planet, the Sirius planet. Saturn, the planet of obstacles. Saturn, the planet of accomplishment, ambition, is lined up with the sun and the moon in your chart, which tells me that as a Libra, you're probably less easygoing than a typical Libra, because Saturn is basically always there with a sense of authority, or someone is always in your life or in your face with that sense of authority that you need to then overcome. What's most interesting about your chart is that these planets in Libra, Saturn, Sun, and the Moon, and Neptune, are all opposite Jupiter in Aries, and they're all 90 degrees or square Uranus in Cancer. So you have 3 points on what we would call a grand square. Can you see that if there was a point there? that there would be a big square here. This is called a T square because it's like half. It's like, think of that as an upside down T. And a T square is about dynamic stress that needs to be resolved. As I look at your chart, I imagine you as the perfect crisis manager. If there was shit going down, I want Sue on my side, kind of figuring out what needs to happen at every junction. Because there's that sense of being able to jump in and negotiate or navigate things as they're out of whack. Because it's almost like if there's nothing going wrong in your life, you have an alarm clock that makes something happen so you have something to do. And it's not about, it's not like having one of those kick me signs. Well, maybe it is. There's a bit of you need to have stuff to chew on in order to know that you're competent, in order to know that you're real, in order to know that you're alive. And so there's this sense of attracting yourself to situations that require a lot of hard work and overcoming obstacles. It's like, there are some people whose lives look like they were born in deck shoes, and just walked off the cover of like GQ Quarterly or something. And then there's Sue. Because Sue has to work for what it is that she gets. And there is some accomplishment. There's a great deal of accomplishment, but it's not always obvious. It's not always out in the open. There's a lot of your chart. See, each of these areas, houses, go around from the ascendant, Libra rising, with Neptune on the ascendant. People look at you and they don't get you. They don't understand you, because there's more going on that's hidden. This is all the 12th house. It goes around from here. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. The 12th house has to do with things that are hidden. It's definitely the house of spirituality. And so with so many planets stuffed into the 12th house, and with Neptune, the planet of confusion and spirituality and illusion, on the ascendant, I would imagine that people don't see who you are because you hold a lot of stuff very deep and very hidden, and it stays that way. And part of what your life goal is working this stuff, whatever it is, out into the open so it doesn't get the best of you, because when it's buried, when it's hidden, it can become problematic. Now, we got good news, bad news. The good news is that Saturn, over the last year and a half, has gone through Libra, and about a year and a half or so ago, your Saturn returned to where it was when you were born, then lined up with your sun and your moon and your Neptune, and right now it's just coming up over your ascendant. This is a time of dynamic change that it says, put away, finish up all the old business, because you need to be light enough on your feet now to be able to do what it is that you need to do next. In the midst of all of this, you have Uranus, which is squaring Pluto in the sky. Uranus in Aries coming up to line up with your Jupiter and line up opposite all of this. So Uranus is falling on one of the points of this T-square, while Pluto is coming in to make the last fourth point on the grand square. Tremendous time of change for you. And to some extent, if you look back over the last year and a half or two, you can probably see the areas of your life where you've had to show up and do the work and deal with real things. And yet now, as Uranus comes in there, I think things can really explode. And I mean they can really, it's like the lightning striking, and you can be freed from the things that were restraining you in the past. And I think that some of this, because A, you're a Libra, and B, because Uranus is opposing your Saturn and your Sun, and then over the next couple of years your Moon, I think that this is about relationship. And I don't mean one relationship, it's about your relationship to the world, to your work, to what you do in the outer world. And I think here that the fallacy would be to think that you have things under control. You don't, nor should you. Because the more you try to control things, the more they will be out of control. In some extent, this is about being open to the changes that are presented to you over this period of time, this year, next year, based upon the things that you dealt with last year and the year before. Make a little sense? Perfect. I like perfect sense. I want some of that in my life. So, thank you. Thank you each, Sue, Emma, and Denise. Appreciate it all. Next month at this time, when you are folding up your umbrellas to come into Soul Food, I will be laying out in the tropical sun in Bali with a little bit of luck. I will see you again in December. Jeff will be here next month. I won't be back until December 1st. And so in the meantime, happy trails. Keep your shit together the best you can during this Uranus-Pluto square. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of one of these, please do so now and get your last little bit of orders in before the bar closes here. And thank you, Soul Food. Thank you, Craig and Anita, and all of you. Done. Excuse me? Sure. Do you have something to take the photo with? Let me just close this down first. Oh, Caroline was born on my sister's birthday, same day, same year. So I always think of Caroline as my little sis. Yes, she is. I'm a great fan. No, I'll come down. Well, either way, if the light's better up here, I don't mind. Who's got the camera? Well, no, let's get this shit out of the way. Buddha is flexible. Okay. Okay, I need to. Oh, you are more than welcome. That made a little bit of sense.
Oh, well, I do astrology too, but it's just, when it's just too overwhelming, sometimes you just need it. But one of my crazier things is I went for the astrology chapter this year for the first time,
Oh,
and signed up for Pusher Astrology.
very good. With who?
With Kim,
Uh-huh.
looking at her last name now, which I kind of put aside because I'm working on this other whole art book stuff that I've working on for years. So that's
Get
why I said
stranded?
perfect. No.
Oh. Thanks again. Thank you, Craig.
Oh, Jeff was sitting in the chair.
That was cute. That was cute.
What, Eastwooding Jeff?
I hope it is.
What was that, Peggy? Jeff? Eastwood? I don't think he cares about much of anything.
No.
I don't think he cared even when he could.
I remember the interesting article today by psychologist talking about it wasn't Obama who wanted to be president, it was his father. And she was asking this whole thing about really you're quite modesty. That it wasn't really Obama that he was talking about or talking to, it was his father.
That's his father.
Yeah.
Did you see Michelle's talk last night? Did you watch that already?
No.
I actually watched it.
Yeah, I have a link to it and I need to watch it.
And I have to say the most impressive thing about it is her arms.
Okay.
I heard. No, Peggy, she's wearing like a kind of, I don't know what you call that, but like and
She
her,
works out.
well, that's what I was saying. I mean, it's a good speech actually.
I've heard. Yeah.
I mean, it was just a speech though. I mean, it was a speech. I mean, it was a good speech, but it was just a speech.
Well, it was comment that somebody, a friend of theirs who was a big was like appalled that she showed up.
Oh, I know, I understand. It was like noticeable, but she could. She got away with it because
Yeah. Yeah.
she was like totally sculpted. Yeah.
The speech charted in, I think it's a 12th grade level, which was like 7 times higher than general and higher than any other students.
It was well done. I don't know. I mean, because they were showing from all angles. She wasn't teleprompting, and I mean, it was a 23-minute speech, and she didn't miss a note. I mean, and it was too tight to be extemporaneous, but it didn't sound memorized, but it was. And she had, I mean, she was not looking down at anything, and you could tell because they had the 360 cameras, there was no teleprompter.